What if I told you that the worst day of your life could actually be the day God saved you from death? I know it sounds impossible. I know you're probably thinking, how can losing everything be a blessing? But before you close this video, let me tell you about Daniel Okafor, a man who thought his world had ended, only to discover that rejection was actually protection. This is a true story that will change how you see every disappointment in your life. Stay with me, because what happened next, nobody saw coming. The rain was falling heavily on Lagos that Friday morning, drumming against the rusty zinc roofs of the surrounding buildings like angry fingers. Daniel Okafor sat in the humid waiting area outside Mr. Adeyemi's office, his white shirt already damp with sweat despite the early hour. His hands trembled slightly as he clutched a brown envelope containing documents he'd been asked to bring. Something felt wrong. In his 7 years at Goldcrest Industries, Daniel had never been summoned to the managing director's office with such urgency. The email had come the night before, cold and formal. Report to MD's office by 8 a.m. sharp. Come with all company property. All company property. Those 3 words had kept him awake all night, tossing and turning on his mattress while his wife, Ngozi, slept beside him, her pregnant belly rising and falling with each peaceful breath. She was 8 months pregnant with their second child. Their daughter, Chioma, was only 4 years old. This was not the time for bad news. "Mr. Okafor, you can come in now." The secretary's voice cut through his thoughts like a knife. Daniel stood up, his legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. He walked into the spacious office where Mr. Adeyemi sat behind a massive mahogany desk, his face unreadable. Beside him sat Mrs. Okolie from Human Resources, her expression sympathetic but professional. That's when Daniel knew. This was the end. "Please, sit down, Daniel," Mr. Adeyemi said, gesturing to the chair across from him. Daniel sat. His heart was pounding so loudly he was sure they could hear it. "Daniel, you've been a good employee," Mr. Adeyemi began, and Daniel's stomach dropped. Nothing good ever followed those words. But as you know, the company has been facing financial difficulties. The economy has not been favorable, and we've had to make some very difficult decisions. The words that followed became a blur. Downsizing, restructuring. Nothing personal. Unfortunate timing. 2 weeks severance pay. Daniel heard himself asking questions, his voice sounding distant and strange. "But sir, my performance reviews have always been excellent. I've never missed a deadline. I've brought in new clients." "This isn't about performance, Daniel. We're letting go of 30% of our workforce. You're not the only one." But Daniel didn't feel like one of many. He felt singled out, punished, abandoned. 20 minutes later, he walked out of Goldcrest Industries for the last time, carrying a small cardboard box with his belongings. A photo of his family, a coffee mug his daughter had decorated with stickers, his certificates, and some pens. 7 years of his life reduced to items that could fit in a box small enough for a child to carry. The security guard, Malam Ibrahim, who had greeted him with a smile every morning for 7 years, couldn't meet his eyes now. Everyone knew. The walk of shame through the office, past colleagues who suddenly became very interested in their computer screens, was the longest walk of Daniel's life. Outside, the rain had stopped, but the sky remained dark and threatening. Lagos traffic roared around him as he stood at the gate of the building that had been his second home. He didn't know what to do next. How do you go home and tell your pregnant wife that you just lost your job? How do you look your 4-year-old daughter in the eye when you can barely afford her school fees for next term? Daniel pulled out his phone and called his best friend, Amika. "Guy, what's up?" Amika answered cheerfully. "They sacked me." Daniel's voice cracked. Silence. "What? Goldcrest sacked you? But why? You're one of their best people." "Economy, downsizing. Does it matter?" Daniel felt tears threatening. He was standing on the street corner of Victoria Island, surrounded by rushing people, and he had never felt more alone. "Where are you? I'm coming to get you. Don't go home yet. Let's talk." Emeka found Daniel sitting at a buka in Lekki, staring at a plate of jollof rice he hadn't touched. He slid into the bench across from him and didn't say anything for a moment. Sometimes silence was better than empty words. "I don't know what to do," Daniel finally said. "The baby is coming in a few weeks. Kioma's school fees are due. Our rent is due next month. I have maybe 3 months' savings, if we're very careful. And that's if nothing else goes wrong. Something will come up, Dan. You're good at what you do. Companies will fight over you." But they both knew that in Lagos, in Nigeria, jobs didn't just appear. The economy was tough. Competition was fierce. Daniel was a 42-year-old marketing executive in a market flooded with younger, cheaper options. The odds were not in his favor. "I've been praying," Daniel continued, his voice barely above a whisper. "Every day, I've been praying for promotion, for increase, for breakthrough. And this is what God gives me? Unemployment? How is this an answer to prayer?" Emeka didn't have an answer. What could he say? That weekend was the darkest of Daniel's life. He told Ngozi everything, and she cried. Not because she was angry, but because she could see her husband breaking. She held him and whispered prayers over him. But Daniel couldn't hear them through the storm in his mind. Sunday morning, he didn't want to go to church. How could he face people? How could he sing, "God is good," when everything was falling apart? But Ngozi insisted, and because he loved her, he went. The sermon that day was about Job, about a man who lost everything but trusted God anyway. Daniel sat in the pew, unmoved. It was easy to preach about faith when you weren't the one suffering. Monday came, Tuesday, Wednesday. Daniel sent out resumes, made phone calls, reached out to old contacts. Nothing. The few responses he got were polite rejections or requests to check back later. By Thursday, a week after his termination, Daniel was sitting in his small living room, staring at the ceiling, wondering if he had made God angry somehow. What had he done to deserve this? And then his phone rang. It was Emeka, but he wasn't calling to check in this time. His voice was shaking. "Dan? Dan, are you watching the news?" "No. Why?" "Turn on your TV. Now. Channel 7. Goldcrest. There's been an accident." Daniel's hands fumbled for the remote. The screen flickered to life, and what he saw made his blood run cold. Goldcrest Industries was on fire. The reporter's voice was frantic, urgent. "We're here at Victoria Island, where Goldcrest Industries, a major manufacturing company, is engulfed in flames. The fire started early this morning, around 8 a.m., when employees were beginning their workday. Fire services are on the scene, but the blaze is intense and spreading rapidly." Daniel couldn't breathe. He recognized the building. He'd walked through those doors every day for 7 years. The camera panned to show employees evacuating, some being carried out on stretchers, smoke billowing from windows. So far, reports indicate that several people are trapped on the upper floors. The fire reportedly started in the old electrical room and spread quickly through the building. Witnesses say they heard an explosion before the flames. The phone fell from Daniel's hand. Friday mornings. That was when the weekly management meeting happened. Every Friday at 8 a.m., all department heads gathered in the conference room, on the 4th floor, the same floor where Daniel could see flames bursting through windows on his TV screen. If he still worked there, he would be in that building right now. If he still had his job, he would have been in that conference room. If Mr. Adeyemi hadn't fired him last Friday, he might be one of the people trapped in those flames. The realization hit him like a physical blow. His knees gave way, and he sank to the floor, staring at the screen. Ngozi came running from the bedroom, saw the TV, saw her husband's face, and understood immediately. "Oh my God," she whispered. "Daniel, you would have been there." The news continued. Rescue efforts are underway, but officials say the situation is critical. Early reports suggest casualties, though numbers are not yet confirmed. This is a developing story. Daniel didn't know how long he sat there, but at some point, his phone started ringing non-stop. Former colleagues who survived, calling to check if he was okay. Some didn't know he'd been fired. Others were calling to tell him he was lucky. So lucky. By evening, the news was worse. 12 people dead. Over 30 injured. Some critically. The building was completely destroyed. Goldcrest Industries, the company that had been his life for 7 years, was gone. Among the dead was Mr. Adeyemi, the man who had fired him. Mrs. Okolie from Human Resources was in intensive care. Collins, the colleague who sat in the cubicle next to Daniel's for 5 years, didn't make it out. Daniel couldn't process it. His mind kept circling back to one thought. That should have been me. That night, Daniel couldn't sleep. He sat on his small balcony, looking out at the Lagos night sky, trying to make sense of everything. A week ago, he had been angry at God, bitter, convinced that losing his job was the worst thing that could happen to him. Now he understood. The job loss hadn't been a punishment. It had been protection. God hadn't abandoned him. God had saved his life. The rejection he thought would destroy him had actually been the hand of God pulling him out of danger. If he had gotten what he wanted, if he had kept that job, gotten that promotion he'd been praying for, he would be dead now, or in a hospital bed, or trapped under rubble. Sometimes God's greatest blessings come wrapped in the package of our biggest disappointments. Those words came back to him from a sermon he'd heard years ago, words he'd dismissed as religious cliché. But now, they were real. Now, they made sense. Ngozi came out and sat beside him, taking his hand. Neither of them spoke for a long time. What was there to say? They had witnessed a miracle disguised as a tragedy. "You know what the hardest part is?" Daniel finally said. "Knowing that while God was saving me, others were dying. Good people. Collins had 3 kids. Why him and not me?" Ngozi squeezed his hand. "I don't know, baby. I don't know why some people get miracles and others don't. But I know that God gave us another chance. We have to do something with it." The funeral for Mr. Adeyemi was the following week. Daniel attended, feeling strange and out of place. He was mourning a man who had fired him, a man whose decision to let him go had inadvertently saved his life. At the funeral, he met Mrs. Adeyemi, the widow. She was surrounded by family, her eyes red from crying, but when she saw Daniel, she pulled him aside. "My husband spoke about you," she said quietly. "That last night, he came home stressed. He told me that firing you was one of the hardest things he'd ever had to do. You were on a list of people he wanted to protect, but the board overruled him." He felt terrible about it. Daniel felt tears streaming down his face. "Ma, I was so angry at him. I thought he had ruined my life." She smiled sadly. "But he didn't, did he? You're here. You're alive." Maybe that was his final gift to you, even if he didn't know it. Weeks passed. Daniel eventually found another job, ironically one that paid better and had better working conditions than Goldcrest ever did. The company that hired him said they were impressed by his resilience and his attitude during the interview, where he'd been honest about being fired, but spoke about it without bitterness. When Ngozi gave birth to their son, they named him Ebubechukwu, God's glory, because in the midst of what looked like destruction, God's glory had been revealed. Daniel often thought about that Friday morning when his world fell apart. He thought about the cardboard box, the walk of shame, the tears, the fear. And he realized that sometimes our biggest breakdowns are actually our biggest breakthroughs in disguise. The friend who betrays you might be saving you from a toxic relationship. The business deal that falls through might be protecting you from bankruptcy. The job you didn't get might be preventing you from being somewhere dangerous. The door that closes might be forcing you toward a better door you never would have tried to open. Every Friday, Daniel visited the memorial that had been erected where Goldcrest Industries once stood. He would stand there, looking at the names of those who died, and he would pray. He would thank God for the gift of life. He would ask for wisdom to use his second chance well. And he would remember that rejection is sometimes protection. 2 years later, Daniel was sitting in his new office when he received an email from a company in Abuja. They had heard about his work and wanted him to head their entire marketing division. It was the opportunity of a lifetime, the kind of position he had dreamed about but never thought possible. As he read the email, he thought about the journey. If Goldcrest hadn't fired him, he would never have been available for the job that led to this opportunity. If that door hadn't closed, this one never would have opened. He picked up his phone and called Ngozi. "Remember when I lost my job and thought God had forgotten about me?" he said when she answered. "How could I forget? I just got offered the position of Regional Marketing Director for Zenith Corporation. Triple my current salary, full benefits, company car. They want me to start next month." Ngozi was quiet for a moment, then he heard her crying softly. "God is so faithful, Daniel. Even when we can't see it, He's working." That evening, as Daniel drove home through Lagos traffic, he thought about everyone watching this story. He thought about people who were going through their own Friday morning, losing jobs, losing relationships, losing opportunities, feeling like God had abandoned them. If he could tell them anything, it would be this: don't judge your story by the chapter you're in. The setback you're experiencing might be the setup for your comeback. The door closing in your face might be saving your life. What looks like the end might actually be a new beginning. The moral of this story: life is not always what it seems. When things fall apart, it's easy to believe that God has forgotten you or that you're being punished. But sometimes, the greatest blessings come disguised as the worst disappointments. Rejection is often protection. Delay is not denial. And the detour that frustrates you might be the route that saves you. Trust the process, even when you can't see the purpose. What looks like a setback today might be the setup for your testimony tomorrow. God's protection doesn't always look like open doors. Sometimes it looks like closed ones. The blessing is not always in getting what you want. Sometimes the blessing is in not getting what you think you need. And remember, if you're going through a dark season right now, hold on. Your Friday morning might be saving you from something you can't yet see. What the enemy meant for evil, God will turn around for your good. That job you didn't get, that relationship that ended, that opportunity that fell through, maybe, just maybe, it wasn't a curse. Maybe it was a blessing in disguise. What seems like your worst day might actually be the day God saved your life. Trust Him. Even when it hurts. Even when it doesn't make sense. Even when everything is falling apart. Because sometimes God answers your prayers by not giving you what you asked for. And years later, you'll look back and thank Him for the prayers He didn't answer the way you wanted. Daniel Okafor lost his job on a Friday. The following Friday, he would have lost his life. God's timing is always perfect, even when we can't understand it. May you have the wisdom to trust God's rejections as much as you celebrate His approvals. May you see the blessings even when they come wrapped in disappointment. And may you always remember, the God who saved Daniel is the same God watching over you today. What detour in your life might actually be saving you? Think about it.